Hi, I'm George Leach. Welcome to my video series on guitar making. We're going to start building a very simple guitar. It's one of my favorite types of guitars to build and to play. It's called a deep body OM. Sometimes I refer to it as a mini jumbo. But it's basically very much like a Martin OM, except I make the body about a ½ inch deeper. And to me, to my ear, that adds a lot more bass and balance, and I just love the way this guitar sounds. So let's get started here. What I've got is, this is the set of woods that I'm going to be using. I've got a beautiful set of Sitka spruce. I got this from LMI a couple of years ago. And then this is a set of Pau Ferro, which I think is just really gorgeous. I just recently bought this from a friend of mine at a guitar show, and I just thought it was stunning wood. And I was anxious to make a guitar with it, so we're going to do this one. So here's our top. It's not ready to glue yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it up like this and run it through the jointer and try to get this edge nice and clean so it's ready to glue up. So over here is our jointer, and let me go do that right now. Okay, so I just ran it through twice, and we'll come back over here, and I've got the top sitting on a light table. So let me turn it on, and we can do a step called candling, which lets you see if any light is coming through as you hold these two halves together. And I'll see if I can get this set up where it can be seen on the camera. But this is actually quite good. There's a couple of little spots up here that are still showing just a little bit of light coming through. You can't always get it perfectly clean with a jointer. You can get it very close, but it won't always get perfect. So there's a little very simple trick that we're going to use to clean that up, and I'll show you that. So I've got some 220 grit sticky back sandpaper here. And I'm just going to take that and lay it across my router table, which is a really nice straight surface because I've done this on this table a lot. So we're going to take our top here, get it lined up as well as we can, and then just hold it vertically and go back and forth. I'm trying not to go off of my sandpaper on either side. And just a few strokes should do it. So let's go check it now on the light table and see if that makes a difference. It's awfully difficult to see this on the camera, but you'll have to take my word for it. It's just as perfect as I can get it right now. So we're going to glue this up. And so I'm going to take a second and get a little gluing jig out, and we'll glue that up and go from there. So we're ready to glue up the top. I've got a little plate joiner here that I got from LMI quite a few years ago. They're simple enough to make, but they're also, some of the bought ones can be very, very good, and this one is. So I'm just going to use Tight Bond on this build. That just keeps things very simple. Perhaps I'll do another one sometime in the future with hide glue. So I'm just trying to get a bead of glue across this edge, and that's going to be enough. I don't have to put it on both sides. So I'm just going to smooth that out and then put the sides together. And as you do that, you can see squeeze out starting to come up. If I can get the camera a little closer, maybe you'll be able to see it. I can't tell if you can or not, but there is good squeeze out coming up. And that's a very good thing. So we're going to put this down. And that just helps hold things down while we're getting everything put in place. Now, let's put the ropes on. And then that gets tied off. And then the next one. And the last one. So those are all in place very nicely. And then, let me set that back just a little bit. I've got a little rubber mallet and some wedges, and I'm going to put these wedges in here to be sure that everything is not only pulled together really well, but held down really well. So that's the whole idea here. That looks really good. This one, and that looks good. And then we're going to give everything a few taps with the rubber mallet. And there we have it. So that is down, it's in the fixture, and it's not going anywhere. So we're going to just let that sit for a little while. I've taken the top out of the fixture to glue the two plates together, and I put it through the sander just to get rid of that little lump of glue that always is there after you glue side or backs together, or tops or backs together. And so I've just got it sitting here on the top of the bench, and I'm going to be trying to point the camera almost straight down, and hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So first thing I'm going to do is just draw a center line right down our top. It's always good to have a center line for reference. And we're going to end up getting rid of that in just a little while. And I'm going to put a template across the top. Now, templates like this are readily available from a lot of places. We made this one, and as we made most of the templates for our guitars a few years ago. And it's just a real handy way to mark where all the braces go, where the sound hole is, and all of that kind of thing. We had originally bought a standard template, and we ended up modifying it slightly. So the legs, the top braces on this guitar are spread a little bit wider, so it gives the top a little bit more room to move down here in the area where the bridge is. And so that kind of opened up the certainly the bass response, and it actually helped our sound quite a bit. But templates like this are available, and they're a good thing to use. So anyway, all I'm going to do is just mark basically where the center of our sound hole would be. And that way we can start preparing the rosette. So I'm just going to eyeball the center of the sound hole. It's going to be right about there. It doesn't have to be exactly right now. Now let's see if I can get it a little closer. That's pretty good. And we're going to drill a hole right at that spot in just a couple of minutes. But what I want to do is draw out where the rosette is going to be and where the cuts are going to be made for the rosette. So the sound hole itself is going to be 2 inches in radius, so diameter of 4 inches. And so that mark right there, if you can see it, I hope that's visible enough on the video. The first ring of the rosette is going to be 1/8 of an inch outside that line. So there's 1/8 of an inch right there. And that first ring is going to be just a piece of purfling that is 1/16 of an inch wide. So I can mark another 1/16 of an inch there. So right there is going to be the first piece of purfling. Then there's going to be another gap of 1/8 of an inch. So let's mark another 1/8 of an inch out there. And now the center portion of the rosette is going to have a 1/4 inch wide piece of abalone shell. I can show you what that'll look like. There is a 1/4 inch wide piece of abalone shell that's going to go in that ring. And on either side of that piece of abalone shell is going to be another 1/16 of an inch black, white, black piece of purfling. So that's a 1/4 inch plus 2 pieces of 1/16 of an inch. So that ends up being a total of 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to mark 1, 2, 3/8 of an inch for that center piece of the rosette. So that's a 1/4 inch, so that's 2/8 plus 2/16, which is another 1/8 to make 3/8. So then after that, there's going to be another 1/8 of an inch gap, and then another 1/16 of an inch piece of purfling. So there, and then there. So there basically are the 3 portions that are going to make up our rosette. 1 piece of purfling, 1 piece of purfling plus color, and then another piece of purfling out here. So that's what it's all going to end up looking like, and we're going to go and see just how to create that right now. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go drill a hole right there at our center point, and we're going to need that because we're going to use a circle cutter that's going to put its radius point right in the middle of that hole so we can cut circles to make all of these lines in our top. So I'm just going to go drill a hole right there through that spot, and I'll be back in a minute. I've just finished drilling this hole, and you can take a look at it right there. And that is a 3/16 hole that I used this brad point drill to use. And so it's easy to set the brad point right on exactly the right spot you want to drill. And that's how we did that. I've got a board down here that has a 3/16 pin sticking out of the board. And that's going to represent the center of our circle. And then I've got a very simple little circle cutter here on my router base that I just had to drill a couple of holes to put this circle cutter onto the router base. This is a very old circle cutter. I think this is circa the maybe 1990 or so from StuMac. And I know that the newer ones are probably a lot better than this, but this one's worked out quite well. And so what I've done, these are the black, white, black pieces of purfling. I've got a couple of those out. They're 1/16 of an inch thick. And I think they're somewhere around 100 thousandths deep. That's way deeper than I want to cut. So I've got this set up to cut a little over halfway through. So I'm going to have quite a bit of this sticking out from the slot that I cut with it. So anyway, you're not going to be able to see this on the video, but as I put the router down over onto the hole or onto the pin, I can go to the slot that I've marked and line up my router bit directly with the slot that I've marked. And I'm going to use that to cut the inside hole. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut the inside hole first, then I'll go out and cut the outside hole next. Then I'll go put in a 3/8 of an inch bit and cut the center hole and the center slot. So anyway, that's the method we're going to use to do this. It's going to make a lot of noise, so hopefully that's not too unpleasant on the video. But I'm going to go ahead and make this cut. And you can take a look at what it looks like. Okay, so there's that first cut, pretty much right on that line that I had marked before. And that's all looking very nice. Let's go do the second cut. I'll line that up and make the cut. Okay, so these two cuts look just fine. Now making the middle cut is a little trickier because as close as I can come to the line, I may be a little bit too far in or a little too far out. So I'm going to go swap the bit on this and I'll turn the camera back on and we'll set it down and see how centered it looks. If it's a little too close one way or the other, we'll stop it, we'll move it. Because this section right in here is all going to be underneath the fingerboard when we're done. So if we make a couple of mistakes, we want to make them all right there. Once we've got it centered, then we'll run it the rest of the way around and we'll be done with our cuts. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'll go change the bit and we'll go make this center cut when I get back. Okay, I'm back. I have put the 3/8 of an inch bit into the router. And we can take a quick look at that. You can see there's the bit in there. And to set the bit depth, I found a piece of my abalone shell. I'm going to be cutting a lot of these out new, but I had a couple of old pieces of scrap that are the correct thickness. So I can just set them down and push it up against the bit and see that I've got the bit set at about the right depth right now. So that's a good way to check your depth. So let me reset the camera a little lower here. And I have already set the radius of the cut where it looks like it's going to be about right, but I can't really tell for sure. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to make a quick little cut. Just maybe move it a quarter of an inch or so, and then we'll lift it up and see what it looks like. Okay, so I don't know how well that's coming out on the video, but this looks very, very close. And I doubt if I can go make it a lot closer. So I'm going to go ahead and make this cut. If it's off ever so slightly, that's not a showstopper of a problem. That's the case on an awful lot of guitars that get made. The big issue is that it's close enough and that it looks good, and I think we're close enough to the ballpark there where we're going to go ahead and make the cut, and I'll do that right now. Okay, well, I don't know how it's showing up on the video, but that looks pretty good. I don't think we could get it much closer. And if we got it closer, I'm not sure if it would go farther in or farther out. It looks just virtually perfect to me. And so the next step is going to be to take a piece of sandpaper. And basically what I've got here is a piece of sticky back sandpaper. This is probably 220. Just fold it over on itself. And I'm just going to clean up all the little feathers that are sticking up. And you can actually go into the slots and kind of clean up those edges a little bit as well. Because now we just need to make it clean, because we're going to go glue things into this slot. And we don't want the slot full of sawdust and other stuff. So I'm going to turn the camera off here while I finish cleaning this up, because I'm just going to keep doing for the next few minutes what I'm doing right now. I'm just cleaning up those slots, and that's about it. Then we're going to start cutting our pieces of shell. And I'll do that in just a few minutes, so I'll be back. Okay, so we've got all of our slots cut in our top now. The next thing we've got to do is make the abalone shell pieces that are going to go in our main ring. So I've got a scrap piece of abalone here. Abalone is laminated pieces of abalone shell. These are developed by Chuck Erickson of Duke of Pearl. And they come in a nice large sheet, and you can see I've gotten this sheet down to a fairly small piece now, but it should be enough to do this rosette. So what I'm going to do is show you how I measure out these pieces and how I cut them and how I create one piece, and then I'm going to go offline and create all the rest of the pieces that we need to make the circle, and we'll go from there. So let me point the camera down here to our workspace. And you can see I've got just a piece of MDF here. And I've got a little point here on the MDF with a tiny little circle around it. So hopefully you can see that. And that's just a little point that I can stick my compass point into repeatedly. And I've got the inside diameter of our piece here, which is 2 3/8, and our outside diameter, which is 2 5/8, and that gives you a 1/4 inch piece in the middle. So what I'm going to do is come and hold this in place here. And since this is not going to be stable on this board, I have to kind of be a little awkward and do the rest with one hand. But I've just put a Sharpie into this compass so I can mark both sides. So there you see I've got the inner and the outer radii marked. And so let me cover this Sharpie back up so it doesn't dry out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get out my jeweler's saw, and I'm going to cut that out. Okay, so I'm ready to cut this piece out here. I've just got it down here on my board. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it a little bit too big, a little bit too far on the inside and a little bit too far on the outside. So we've got plenty of room to shape it and get it down to exactly the right dimension. So here's my little abalone cutting board, and there's my lines. So I'm just going to put my little jeweler's saw in here, and I'm going to start cutting on this. Okay, so there's the inside line done. So I'm going to go just outside the outer line. Okay, done. So there's one piece. And I kind of like to keep these pieces a little bit on the short side. If you make them too long, often they have a little trouble fitting later because every one of the jigs might be just not quite perfectly accurate. And the longer a piece you make, the more the inaccuracies grow. So keeping the pieces very short keeps things really simple, and everything seems to fit really well. So I'm going to go over to the drill press now. I'll reset the camera up and cut and just sand that inner dimension to just the right size. I'll be right back. Here we are over at the drill press. You'll see that this jig is really, really simple. It is just a radius of 2 3/8 cut onto a piece of plywood with a bit of sandpaper, sticky backed sandpaper on it. And that's it. I have to have the drill press to the lowest speed possible, so this is going like 400 RPMs. And if I have a whole bunch of these to do, I'll turn on the vacuum and let it vacuum away the dust. In this case, I've just got one piece. It's not going to make that much dust, so I'll just show you how this works. And so again, it's just a really simple little jig. Done. So there's the inside radius cut on this one, and it's ready to go. So I'll take it over and I'll show you the jig that I use to cut the outside radius, and then we'll have this piece basically ready to use. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we're moving over to the disc sander now, and I'll show you the next little jig that I've got that we're going to use to sand the outside radius of our pieces of abalone shell. It's a very simple little jig. The base here is a square block. It's got a little runner here that fits into the slot of the disc sander, and a couple of screws so I can move it in and out, which you have to do all the time. And the radius that this is spinning on from the center out is about a 1/16 of an inch under what we need it to be. So we need it to be 2 5/8 for that outside radius. It's a 1/16 under that, whatever that turns out to be. So anyway, here's our piece. You can see it fits on this ledge just right. And now this piece here is what holds everything down. So I've just got a little piece of a rubber band that I glued to the edge of this so that it can have a little gripping power and grip that piece of abalone shell and hold it down. So I can put the abalone shell, I can lift this up a little bit, put the abalone shell in there, and then tighten this screw down, and everything is held in place while I do my sanding. So I doubt if this is, it's not setting the correct radius just yet, but that's the way it works. So let me slightly adjust this so that I've got it at least going against the piece, and I'll tighten that down and I'll show you how it works. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that didn't do very much yet. We're going to need to take a little bit more off. So I will loosen this screw just a bit and push it forward just very slightly. And tighten it down. And here we go again. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go over and get my my MDF board, and I'll be right back. So this is the board that we're going to use to check everything. All of my little pieces of shell need to fit in this slot. And so you can see this doesn't quite fit yet. The inside radius is good, and I've got to take the outside radius down until this just fits into that slot. And then all the pieces will go around it. So we're going to keep working this. Once we've got one to fit, then we know what the setting is for this whole jig, and we don't need to mess with it anymore. We can cut our inside radius bring the piece over here, and the outside radius is already set. So we've just got to find that point, which we haven't quite found yet, and keep going. Let's check it again. Not quite. So this is what takes most of the time, is getting everything to fit for that first time. I think that's going to be quite enough. All right, let's check it now. Still not quite there, but it's getting pretty close. I think I'm going to have to check it every time I make an adjustment now. It's getting so close. It is just almost ready to drop in. And there it goes. It's in the slot, and we're ready to go do the next one. So I'm going to go and cut a bunch more of these, do the inside radius, do the outside radius, put them all in the slot, and then we'll be ready to glue it in. So I will go do that, and I'll let you see what it looks like when I'm done. Okay, so I've got all of the pieces sanded. The inside and outside radius are sanded. And as you can see here, it's fitting around fairly nicely around the circle. The only problem that's left right now is that some of the angles are not 90 degrees on the pieces. The edges are not matching up very well. So I've got several cases here where I've got to go sand some of these edges down so that the pieces fit together nicely. In some cases they fit, in some cases they don't. So that's the next job. That'll take a few minutes, and I'm going to do that now. So I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, so all the pieces for the rosette are cut. They fit together. Everything's looking really good. One thing that I want to do now, I'm over by my spray booth. Before I glue the pieces in, I want to put a little bit of shellac around that rosette on the top. This is not good shellac that I would use to do in a finish at all, but it's just cheap shellac from Rockler that does a good job for this kind of thing. And I'm just going to spray a little bit on there. And the reason for this is I'm going to use super glue to put in the rosette. And we'll get all the pieces fitted when it's dry, get it all fitted, make sure everything looks good, and once it looks right, we're just going to put a little bead of super glue around the whole thing and it'll be done. So anyway, I'm going to let that shellac dry for a few minutes, and then we'll start putting in the rosette. So we're ready to put the shell into our rosette, or put the whole rosette together, really. And one thing I didn't explain, the reason that we need to put shellac down before we use super glue is sometimes super glue can run through the grain and actually stain. And I've had this happen before, where it can stain your top kind of a yellow color, and you can't sand that out. So you put the shellac in there as a barrier, so the super glue can't run back into the grain and just stay right there on the surface and glue everything in very nicely. So that's the whole reason for using it. And let me point the camera down now at what we're going to be doing. And so there is our rosette, and there is the shell. And here's a couple of pieces of our black, white, black purfling material that we're going to be using. So I'm going to just put this outer ring in here, and that fits in there just like that. And I'll put in the inner ring as well. And there's nothing holding those in, so they are free to move around and knock each other out, which will probably happen from time to time. So we'll just deal with that the best we can. But I found this to be the best way to put these things in. Now I'm just going to grab the first piece of shell, and I'm going to start way over here. And I'm going to spread out these two purflings, and I'm going to slide one piece of shell right in between. There we go. And just slide that right into there. So we've got one piece down. So I'm going to take the next piece out here and set it on top of the first one and just slide it forward. And it will very gently push the purflings out. And we're just going to go all the way around doing this same thing. You can't hold the purflings in place, so you have to just slide in the shell and let the shell hold the purflings in place. So here's a little bit longer piece. I'm just going to put in there and do the same thing with. See, this came out, so we're just going to gently put it back in place. And all the pieces are in there. They're looking really good. And we just keep moving. Keep putting it in. And the next piece. And if it pushes a previous piece out of the way, just push it all back. So everything's fitting very nicely. And we just keep working our way around. And you've got to be sure you push them against each other so that there's no gaps. There we go. Okay. It's looking really good. Okay, so push those out of the way. We just push them back. Okay. Everybody's looking good in there. And there's the last piece. It's all in. I don't see any gaps. Everything's looking very good. So I'm going to use our super glue. This is master glue, a thin formula, and that's just what we want. We want something that's going to be nice and thin, and I'm just going to put it around the edge. Squeeze it all the way around that edge there. I like to use these pipettes because they give me really good control just where I want it to go. Now let's go around the inside edge. And I'm out. So let me refill my pipette here. Okay. And that's it. We are set. And that should be quite enough to get everything to set up very nicely. And so what I'm going to do is accelerate this. So I'm just going to use Glue Boost Accelerator. And I've had very good luck with this stuff. And that's it. The inside section is done. So I'm going to go cut a couple pieces of purfling to do the outer rings, and I'll be right back and we'll get those done. Okay, so we're back. I have cut a couple of pieces of purfling, and I'm going to put these right into the slot, and they just fit right in. Everything is fitting just perfectly here. And sometimes I'll use a hammer to just kind of help mash that piece in. And it's in there beautifully. And now for the outer ring, let's get it put in. That's not centered very well, so I'm going to pull this piece out and push it over just a little bit more. Try to get it centered a little better. Not that it matters. All this is going to be covered up by the fingerboard. And it's in all the way around. So again, I'm going to get our super glue and glue this in. And you don't need to put it on both sides. One side is quite enough. This stuff will wick all the way around. So that one is done. So it's okay, and I just ran out again. So let's get a little bit more glue. Okay. Done. So that looks great. So now again, I'm going to use the accelerator. And that's quite enough. And that's it. That's our rosette. It looks terrific. And the next thing I'm going to do is put this through the sander and sand it flat. And we'll be done with the top portion of our soundboard. So we've just gotten the top out of the sander. This is just the same thickness sander we used before. And I'll show it to you. It looks fantastic. And now I'll put this through several times, just taking a few thousandths off at a time. I don't want to take off a whole lot in any one pass. So this is 4 or 5 passes to get it down where it is, and it's just ideal. So all the shellac is gone, and our top is left just beautiful. So the next thing we need to do is cut out the sound hole. So what I've done is I've got a ruler here, and I'm just making a mark at about 1/8 of an inch in from the inside edge of that purfling. And then I've got my router on the circle cutter, and it is actually set up at just about the right spot right now. So I've also got the thickness that this is going to cut just a little bit thicker. It's going to cut a little deeper than the thickness of our top. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up and cut it around. I want to get some ear protection on. And sorry about the noise, but we'll make this cut right now. Okay. So there it is. Now the top is still very thick. Let me take a quick measurement of it and see just where we are. So right now we are approximately 130 thousandths, plus or minus just a bit. So we're just over 1/8 of an inch. And we need to take this down quite a bit. I like to make my tops about 95 thousandths. And so I don't know how thick or thin that is compared to other luthiers. I imagine that a lot of us tend to put it at a very similar spot. But I've found that most of the time, now this is a very stiff piece of Sitka, so it can go relatively thin and still have plenty of strength to it. And then we're going to put braces on. But the first thing I'll do is take this down somewhere right around 95 thousandths, and I'll just put this through the sander, and I'm going to take it all off of the underside. The top is beautiful. I don't want to mess with that, so I'm going to take it all of the underside of the top, and then when that's done, I'll be back. Okay, the top is ready to go. It looks absolutely beautiful. It's still very nice and stiff, and it measures between about 93 and 96. So that's really very, very nice. Okay, so we're ready to brace the top, and before we actually do that, I want to explain a little bit about what we're going to do and why we're going to do it this way. So I'm over here at my whiteboard, and I'm going to try to draw this out where it's can be understood. I don't draw that well, so bear with me here. So what I've got is this is the side view of the guitar here. So this is the top. Here's your fingerboard and the neck. And over here is your bridge. So the fingerboard is about 1/4 of an inch thick. It's going to be in our case. The bridge is typically thicker than that. It's going to be between 5/16 to 3/8 thick. So if you've just got the neck flat on your guitar top, and let's say that we've got a saddle sticking up about 1/8 of an inch over here, then the strings have to be extremely high for them to hit that saddle. It just doesn't work. If this is 1/4, this is 3/8 plus another 1/8, so almost a 1/2 inch tall, your action's going to be a mile high. It can't work. So what a lot of guitar companies have done is they take the neck here, and the neck has to go back about 1.5 degrees, something like that. So they take the neck and they taper it back, and then right here at the edge of the guitar, which just happens to be your 14th fret in this case, the angle breaks. So it comes up like this, there's your fret, and now all of a sudden it's flat. And that's been the accepted way to do it for a long time. You can see on an awful lot of very popular guitars, that's the way it's done. So the action up here is high, and a lot of people figure that's okay, they don't play up there anyway. Well, it's been discovered more recently that it's really pretty easy to make that work out. One thing that's been very popular lately has been radius dishes that enable you to make your top dome at about a 25-foot radius, and that's what we're going to use. We're going to use a 25-foot spherical radius on our top. Now, if we do that, this picture gets a little bit different, and I can't draw it very well, but I'm going to try. This is going to have a bit of a dome to it, and now that bridge is going to be sitting on this dome. And let's erase some of my marks here. That bridge is going to be sitting here. And the fingerboard is going to be at the correct angle now, so that when I've got a saddle on my bridge, the strings can come across and hit it just about right. So you don't have to break that angle if you've got a little bit of a radius. And some people say it's 28 feet. I've had really good luck with 25 feet, and so that's what we're going to use. Now on the back, it's different. We're going to put a 15-foot radius on the back. That's been fairly common, so I'm just going to do it that way. So we've got to keep track of that. 25 on the top, 15 on the back, and then we should get a really nice flat contact with our fingerboard, and it'll have the proper taper on it, and it should work out just perfectly for our action and for everything. So anyway, that's an explanation of why we're going to do this. So now let's go over to the other bench. Okay, so since we last talked, here's the top. The Rosette is looking fantastic. And I turned it over. I have put my template on it, and then I cut out, I drew the template, and I just cut out, a little bit oversized around the template. And now we're going to draw on our braces. So I can just set my template right on the center lines, the center marks that I've got. I didn't draw a long center line across the guitar. I just drew a couple of notches down here, a couple of marks. And so that should all be just about right. So now what I'm going to do is, I've got to grab my pencil first, but I'm just going to draw on where all the braces go. And let's see, here's my pencil. So let's do that. The X brace. And now all of these marks are slightly small. They're slightly smaller than the brace. So I know when I put my brace down, if it covers the line completely, I've got it in just the right spot. So hopefully when we're all done, you won't see any of these pencil lines. I don't have to go back and erase anything because they'll all be covered by the braces. Okay, that's all of those. And up here is our upper face brace. And then above that is just a very thin brace that is our upper transverse graft. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, here are all of the leftover scraps from cutting the top. I'm going to save these because we're going to need some of them. And so we're just going to keep those handy, and then when we need them, we can go get them. So anyway, there is what all of our braces are going to look like. I made a little boo-boo over here. It looks ugly, but it's going to get covered. So now, here I've got a nice piece of cedar brace wood. And I've decided on this guitar, I'm going to go with cedar braces. And I've done this a lot. I like cedar braces on a spruce top. And the reason basically is this. These braces are just virtually as strong as spruce, but it's lighter. And so that's going to give my top a little bit more movement. I've found that my guitars, when I do this, have a little more volume. It's just a good thing all the way around. And so what I'm going to do, oh, and the other thing, a lot of people argue that, well, you got to use braces that are the brace wood that's the same as the top, because then the coefficient of expansion and contraction is the same. Well, that's a crock, and here's why. Your expansion and contraction is mainly in the direction perpendicular to the grain lines. So if I were putting on all my braces exactly parallel to the brace lines, that would be correct, but I'm not. We're going to be putting our braces on at an angle, at a lot of different angles here. So the coefficient of expansion and contraction is different anyway. So it doesn't really matter. I've got guitars that are 20 years old that have spruce tops and cedar braces, and that's just fine. So that's what we're going to do with this guitar, and I think it'll pay off in the end. And so I'm going to go cut this wood down a little bit and make some braces out of it. And so I'm just going to cut some strips, and about just over 1/4 inch wide, so I can then put those into my sander, get them exactly 1/4 inch wide, and then we'll go from there. So I'll sand this, and then I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so I cut that piece of brace material down, and I've got, I'll show you here, I've got a few very nice strips of brace material. These are all 1/4 inch wide after I sanded them, or 1/4 inch thick. The height of these braces is taller than I need them to be. It's 3/4 of an inch right now, and we're going to deal with that later. The first thing I want to do is I want to just cut some of this brace material to the length that we need it. And so I'm just going to lay it on top of the brace pattern. And I want this one to be longer than it actually shows, because the X brace is going to actually be long enough to cut into the kerf. So I want it to be a little longer than the drawing shows. So after making those marks, I'm just going to have just use a little Japanese saw here and just cut that to length. And same with the other one. And now these excess pieces, I save all of those. You saw the pieces that I used to clamp in the sides. That's where I get all those from. So I'm going to save those. So that's my X. And then this last piece I'm going to use to mark the lower face braces down here. So I'll mark that one and cut it off. And then I'll mark the other one. And cut it off. And so again, I'm left with a spare piece of material that I will put to use. So let's move this a little bit closer so you can see a little better what's going on. So there's the two braces that I'll use for the lower face braces. And then these two I'll use for the X brace. So there's one and there's the other. So the first thing that I want to do on all of this brace material is I'm going to decide which side is going to be the down side. And on each of these braces, I've got one side that's pretty smooth. I'm going to use that as the side that's going to be down against the guitar. And now I'm going to go get a template that's got a 25-foot radius on it. So I'll be right back. So here is my 25-foot radius template. I got this from LMI several years ago. And what I'm going to do now is mark each brace. So I'm just going to draw. Maybe I can get a little bit closer and show this a little bit better. So I'm just putting the template on top of the brace, getting it spaced about as evenly as I can. And I'm going to draw that radius right onto the brace. I'll do the same thing with the other X brace. So you can see my line got very close to the edge, but it didn't go over the edge. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two braces over to my belt sander and I'm going to sand that 25-foot radius onto them. So let's go over to the belt sander and we'll do that. Okay, so here we are at the belt sander. This is a Grizzly belt sander, and it actually will sand in the vertical or horizontal direction. This has been a great sander because I like it as an edge sander like this. That's how I use it the most. But I'm going to turn on the vacuum and turn the sander on, and so it's going to make some noise here, but I want to just show you how this is done, even though it'll be noisy. So I'm going to get everything turned on, and we'll sand this radius onto these two braces. Okay, so now these two braces look really good, and sometimes I like to hold them up where I can look right down the brace and see the curvature, and that really helps you to determine if the brace has any flat spots. And this doesn't. It looks really good all the way down. So we're going to go cut the X and get ready to glue on the X brace. Okay, so here are the two braces. I've got the lower brace right on that line, and the upper brace I want to set down. I want to just stand right over it so I can tell if it's right on the line. And that appears to be pretty good right there. Once I've got it, and it seems to be pretty stable in position, then I can mark both sides of that brace. So you can see my mark there, right there where I've marked it. And now we're going to go cut that. Okay, so we're over at the bench. These braces right now are 3/4 of an inch tall. That's way taller than I want them to be in the final form. I want them to be 5/8 of an inch tall when they're finally done. So I'm going to make a mark. Since this is the bottom brace, I'm going to make a mark from the bottom up at 5/8 of an inch, showing just how tall that's going to be when it's all done. And now, a lot of times when somebody makes an X brace, they cut halfway down and make each brace at the X joint halfway. I'm not going to do that. I want this bottom brace here to be really strong. So I heard this from an old-time luthier many, many years ago, that it's good to make this bottom brace between 2/3 and 3/4 tall instead of half. So it's very, very strong. It's hard to get that joint absolutely perfect. So make the bottom brace strong. So I'm going to mark it, since 5/8 of an inch is the same as 20 30-seconds. So the scale's in 30 seconds. So I'm going to mark it at about 15. And that's 3/4 of the way. So what we'll do is we're just going to tighten on the brace here, tighten the clamp onto the brace with a vise. And I've got a razor saw here. And I'm going to cut this down to the line that I just made. And I want to be sure I stay on that angle that I just marked. So that's pretty close. Now, to get rid of that material, I'm going to use a chisel. So the jaws of my vise here are neoprene, so I'm going to use that as my base, and I'm just going to chip this out. And so that's pretty good right there. And that's just about down to my line. I might get a file and file that out just a little bit farther, but we'll deal with that in a minute. So now we're going to go back over to the other bench here and mark the other brace. So this is the brace that's going to be on the bottom. Put it right in position. So here's the brace that's going to be on the top, so I want to be sure I get that curved edge down. It fits right into my notch. So I'm going to mark this brace where it crosses the other brace. So there we go. So you can see on there I've got the edges marked, and on that side too. So I'm going to go back over to the other bench and cut those lines. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is bring those edges out onto the surface. There to there, there to there. And then I can now use the ruler and bring those lines across. And now I can cut. Now, since the other brace was, I left 3/4 of the brace height, the final brace height. This one, I'm going to cut 3/4 of it away. So I'm going to make another measurement here. And so now I'm going to come up about 15-30 seconds. And I'm going to cut that away. So hopefully these two can start to fit together soon. I want to make these lines as vertical as I can. Okay. All right, now let's see if they fit together. I'm just going to hold them here since this is the brace on the bottom. Here's the one on the top. And it's pretty close. I've probably got about 1/16 of an inch to go. So I can still see the line on both of them. So I'm going to cut this one back just a little bit more, right to my line. Cut this one back slightly. Okay, and let's see how close they are now. That's the one on the bottom. They're very close. So now to get the final amount done, I'm not going to do that with a saw. I'm going to get a file out and file those down so that they can be as accurate as possible. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I've gotten a small file here that I'm going to use, and it fits right into this slot very nicely. So I'm just going to take this down by a few strokes and then see how close we fit. Definitely closer. So I'm going to take this other side, take a little bit more off of it. Oh, it's very close now. It's not quite there. And it's really critically important that when these two are on, that this is all the way to the surface. That's part of my gluing surface for the brace, and it's really critical that it gets all the way to the surface. Okay, let's see. Done that way, put that down that way. That feels like it's there. I'm going to go over to the top and check it out there. Okay, here we are. So there's the bottom brace. There's the top brace. And it is down. Both of them are touching very nicely. The angle is good. Everything looks good. So we're ready to glue our X brace down. So I'm going to hold off for a second to do that. And I'm going to get these two lower face braces ready first. And then we'll glue it down. So if you remember, what we did first was we drew the 25-foot radius onto the bottom of the brace. There's one. And there's the other one. It's very difficult to tell just looking at them from the side which one is the actual brace that we're going to use, or which is the side that's been sanded. So the only way that you can really tell that is to look down the edge like this, just like I showed before, where if you look down the edge of the brace this way, you can tell which is the flat edge and which is the sanded edge. So let's go over to the sander and sand these two. Actually, I don't need to show you that. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so now before we go glue these braces down, these are still very tall. We would have a lot of carving to do on those braces if I just went and glued them. So what I've done is, many years ago, we made this set of templates that shows a basic shape for my brace pattern. And I'm going to show this down here. I'm going to take each of these X braces here we go. And I'm going to, yeah, that looks good. I'm going to put this template right down over the brace. There we go. And just draw the basic shape of the brace on here. We still have a lot of carving to do, but this is just the very basic shape, just so we don't have to do quite so much carving on it later. So there's one of the X braces. Here's the other one. Okay, and then here is my template for my lower face brace. So put that on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to take each of these braces over to the bandsaw and just do a real rough cut of what the rough brace shape is going to be. We're still going to go do some more carving on these, but at least the bulk of the material is gone and we can just carve less than we would otherwise have to. It just takes less time to do it that way. And so before I actually go carve these, I want to spend a couple minutes at the whiteboard explaining my theory of what the carved braces should look like. So I'm going to go just cut these out on the bandsaw real quick, I'll show them to you, and then we'll talk about brace shapes and go from there. Okay, so here are my top braces. There's the upper X brace, there's the lower X brace. Those will go on there just like that. And these are the two lower face braces. Now I'm going to go back over to the whiteboard, and we'll talk about how I like to shape my braces. That doesn't mean that this is the only way to do it. I don't know anybody else that does it like this, but I'm going to explain how I like to do it. So let's assume that this is the top of our guitar, and I've got the center of my X brace here, and what I'm going to draw is a set of scalloped braces. These are used by Martin and Gibson and a lot of companies. Okay, so here's the center of the X. The brace gets scalloped down and then comes back up and then goes down to where it gets tied into the curve. I don't like scalloped braces. And here's why. There's a very famous book out there, and I'm not going to say who the author is or the name of the book, but it says that the reason scalloped braces are so strong is because they act like a suspension bridge. Well, that is absolutely incorrect. This is not a suspension bridge, it's a truss. And when you've got a truss simply works by the height of the brace. It's like if you're in a large room and you've got these trusses for beams going across the ceiling. How thick those beams are is how strong they are. And it's the same thing with your braces. When you thin the braces down too much, they get very, very weak. And this is one of the reasons that a lot of guitars tend to belly right behind the bridge. There's a tremendous amount of tension pulling up, and that scalloped brace makes the brace weak right in the most critical spot on the guitar. So I don't like to scallop my braces. Also, you bring it back up high here. I don't know why out here I'd want to create a dead spot. So anyway, enough ranting and raving about scalloped braces. I don't like them. I don't use them. Most guitar makers do, and I don't. So what I like to do is this starts off here at full height, which for me is 5/8. Then I bring the brace down to where it's tall enough to still be strong, but low enough to let the top move better. So I'll bring it down here to about 3/8. And then I don't take it back up. Out here, a couple inches from the edge, I'll bring it down and tie it into the curve. That's what my braces look like. My guitars get plenty of good bass response, and they don't belly. And especially with this 25-foot radius on the top, which gives you a little bit more strength, because a sphere is a very stable shape. That helps a little bit. This helps a lot. And you should have a very stable top on your guitar, and you're going to get plenty of bass response. And so we'll be able to hear that when we're done. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. And now let's go glue these braces down, and we're going to get ready to put on more braces while these are drying. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we're getting ready to glue down these braces, and I want to show you my Go-Bar deck, my Go-Bar station. This is the base of the station here, and there's our 25-foot radius dish right there. Now I've got some very heavy sandpaper on this dish, so when I'm putting a top down on it, I lay down a layer of paper towels to avoid that getting scratched up or getting damaged in any way. The top of the Go-Bar deck is a shelf, the bottom of a shelf that I've got, and so this just works out terrific. I've got a bench here that I can put different radius dishes on, and use the bottom of this shelf as the Go-Bar deck. So this works out really well. For my Go-Bars, I just use dowels. These are 5/16 dowels. I get them at Home Depot. There's a lot of places that sell dowels. and these work out really well. So you'll see it in action here in just a minute. I want to move the camera so it's a little bit closer and you can see what's going on a little bit better. So there's the top. There's all the lines that we're going to use to line things up. And again, I've just got regular original Titebond that I'm going to use to do this glue up. And let's go get started. So I'm going to put the whole X brace down at once. So I'm putting on a bead of Titebond on the bottom. And I'll spread that. And then I want to set that down face up there for a second, and I'll do the next one. So I don't want to spend any extra time on this. So I want the glue to spread. I want to get a little bit in that notch. And that looks pretty good. And I didn't get any in this notch over here, so I'm going to get some there right now. And we're ready. So I'm going to put these two together and get them in position as fast as I can. That actually is looking really, really good. Now you just have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes when this wet glue goes down, things want to swim around a little bit. So we just got to be careful to avoid that and hold things down. So I'm going to put several bars on here just to be sure things are clamped down very nicely. About 3 bars across works quite well. I've got good glue squeeze out. I don't know if that's coming through on the camera or not, but the squeeze out looks quite good. It looks very good. Okay, so there's the X. That's looking good. I'm not going to wipe this glue squeeze out away just yet. I want to wait just a few minutes, and then the squeeze out starts to get a little bit leathery, and it's easier to clean up after 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll get these 2 braces on. Don't worry about that. And our last one, at least for right now. And that happens sometimes. So let's get that back on. I think I need a little more glue there. One of my go bars just got a little bit close to the edge and it caused that brace to tip over. So nothing's broken, nothing's damaged. Let's just move on. Okay, let's try to avoid that this time. Okay. There we go. That's looking good. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the camera. I'm going to wait a few minutes and come back and clean up the glue squeeze out. Okay, so I'm back and I've been scraping up some of this glue. So here's a little bit here. This is the tool that I'm using. It's just a little tool that's used for like clay sculpting and that kind of thing. It's got a little scoop on one end and it works great for getting into these corners and cleaning out glue. So I've got several of these and I use them literally all the time when I'm cleaning up glue. Okay, well, that's about it. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry and we'll come back in a little while and do some more braces. Okay, so we've got the first set of braces glued onto the top and everything is looking very good. So there it is right there. The next set of braces we're going to put on are the finger braces, and I'll show you how I'm going to make those. These are just a 1/4 inch wide, approximately a 1/4 inch tall, and the small ones are 2.5 inches long, and the long ones are 3.25 inches long. And so I've got 2 of each one of those. And so I'm going to shape those on the sander. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that in just a second. The next brace is the upper face brace. It is a 1/2 inch wide and 5/8 tall and full length of the upper bout. So that one, we have to go and put the radius on the bottom of that one and then shape the top. These finger braces, I'm not going to radius the bottom of those. They're just too short. There's no way that you can accurately put a 25-foot radius on there, and it's just not that critical. So we're going to make those just flat, and that's going to be good enough. And the next brace we're going to do is it's not really considered a brace, but it's the bridge plate. Now this is a grossly oversized hunk of maple here. It's about 90 thousandths thick. And I want to put a fairly small bridge plate in here because it's just unnecessary to take up all of that space. And this seems like a bridge plate this size is doing everything it can to keep the top from moving. So we don't want to do that. Here's how we're going to figure out where the bridge plate goes. I've got a scale ruler here. and it's got our scale on it. Our scale for this guitar is going to be 25.4 inches. It's a standard Martin long scale. And since the neck hits the body at the 14th fret, what we're going to do is we're going to place the scale on the body where this line here depicting the neck joint of the guitar, we're going to put that at the 14th fret. So there is our ruler with the 14th fret marked right there. And that then shows, I'm going to stick this in here, that the saddle would be right about at that mark. So I've got a mark here that if I shove this all the way in to where those two legs of the lower of the X braces come together, that's as far in as it can go. So I also want this to be about 1.5 inches in total width. So what we can do, because that's about the size of our bridge itself, is about 1.5 inches. And so if we set this where the saddle is on the order of 1/4 inch behind the front of the bridge, and then go 1.5 inches, there would be the approximate size of this of our bridge plate. So I'm just going to, I've got 2 marks. I'm going to mark them parallel and go all the way across the bridge and cut, or all across the bridge plate and cut those down. So we've got a much narrower bridge plate. So I'm going to go off camera and do that. I'm just going to make these marks parallel to what I've got as the front and the back end of the bridge plate and cut that down. So I'll be back in just a minute. We're back. So I've got the bridge plate here. I've cut it down, and I just want to sand it to the line so that it looks nice. So I'll do that real quick. So that is ready. So I'm turning off the sander now so I can explain what I'm going to do with these finger braces. I want to be sure the bottoms are nice and flat, and then I've got a center point marked here, and I'm just going to shave away everything up to that center point, and so there's just nothing left but a little triangle. So it's very, very simple to make these, and there's not much to them when they're done. So let me show you real quick. Get the bottom nice and flat, so that's good. Now I'm just going to cut off half of it. And that's it. That's what they look like. They're very, very easy to make. Okay, those are done. So now we can take them over and get them on the go bar deck and glue those onto the guitar along with our bridge plate. So I'll see you over there in a minute. Okay, here we are. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue down this bridge plate. So I'm just going to get some glue smeared across the top of that, or I guess the bottom of it. Just try to get as nice and even a little coat as you can. And the good thing about the bridge plate is it goes right up against the braces, so it doesn't swim very much. So we're going to use a couple of cauls. We're going to use 3 little cauls just to kind of help spread out the force of the go bars. And you probably can't see it in the camera, but I'm already seeing some good squeeze out just from that first one. And let's get the next 2 in there. And there it is. So there's our bridge plate. And we'll go clean up that squeeze out after a little while. Then we've got our 4 finger braces. So these really shouldn't take more than 1 go bar. But if I'm not getting good squeeze out, I'll put a second one on there. So I'm going to put on these far ones first. Okay, that looks really good. Okay, get one of the long ones on there. There we go. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to put on the upper face brace. Okay, I got good squeeze out. All of those look really good. I'm going to turn the camera off and clean up the glue. And we've got a couple more. We've got 3 more little braces that we've got to put onto the top, and we'll take care of that in just a little while. We'll take care of it when we take off these braces, or these go bars. Okay, so as I said in the last video, we've got 3 more braces that we need to cut out and get ready to put onto the top, and then we'll be done with the top for now. So I've moved the top over to this little bench here, and there it is. And so this is a piece of scrap wood from the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over here to the bandsaw real quick, and I'm going to cut off one strip, maybe 5/16 wide, something like that. And so there's the bandsaw. So let me go cut that very quickly. Okay, so here's the piece that I just cut out. So I've got one smooth side and one rough side. So I'm just going to grab a sanding block. And this is just a block about 3 inches wide with some sticky back sandpaper glued on it. And I've probably got 15 or 20 of these of different sizes and different shapes that I need to use for small pieces of wood. So anyway, this is what we need now. And so let me try to get the camera pointed down. And what this is going to do is it's going to just be a bit of a brace right around the sound hole. So it just adds just a little bit of bracing underneath the rosette. And so that's all it does. So I'm just going to sit it there, mark where it would cross these braces here, here. And then I want to cut that out. So I've just got a small saw here that I'll use to cut that. And the other side. I'm just getting it close to the lines. There. So there's one. So I'm going to go over to the disc sander very quickly and get those sanded back to where the lines are, and I'll be right back. I'm back from the sander. Here's the little piece, and I'm going to see how it fits. And it fits in there just very nicely. I'm going to go make another one of these exactly the same way with the remainder of this piece, and I'll be right back. Okay, so you can see here's the other piece that fits in there very nicely. So those just go right around that sound hole. You don't want to make these really tall. I know I've seen some guitar makers that like to make these tall, maybe kind of make them look like the finger braces where they have a peak in the middle. I don't recommend that. And the reason is, if you're going to put a pickup in, especially something like an Anthem, an LR Baggs Anthem, those fit right around that sound hole, right on the sound hole edge, and they're designed to go over that thin brace. If you make your brace too tall, the Anthem controls won't fit, so you'll have to sand or cut the brace down some way anyway. So this is very much the way that Martin makes these braces. They're just very short, and you're able to put a good high quality pickup and the pickup controls right in there around the sound hole. Okay, so I've got one more brace, and this is what it's going to look like. It is called the upper transverse graft, and it's going to go right up here. And the grain is going to be going cross grain from the top. And the whole purpose of this brace is to keep the top from splitting around where the neck, the fingerboard goes over the top of the guitar. Since the expansion and contraction wants to go mostly across grain like this, and that neck is sitting on there, and it's got a very different coefficient of expansion. Martin found that that's where they tended to get splits. So they decided to start putting this upper transverse graft in their guitars, and that significantly helps. So I'm just going to use another piece of this scrap material, same scrap material we've just been using, and that just fits right in there. So I'm just going to draw this off and go cut it out of the bandsaw, and I'll show it to you as we're fitting it on. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we're ready to go bar these pieces in. I'll take this first one and squeeze a little bit of glue on. And it's ready to go. So I've got a couple of little pieces of wood sitting over here on the side that are going to be used as cauls, just to spread out the force. And these pieces of wood are thin enough so that I can easily reach around them to clean out the glue squeeze out. So let's get this second one in. Okay. Okay, those look good. Okay, now for the upper transverse graft. This is by far the hardest one to do because it's a big, flat surface and it wants to swim around. So get some glue spread on there. We're just going to get it down and try to get the go bars as vertical as possible. If you've got a go bar that's leaning way off to one side, it's going to be pushing the other way, and that will create major problems. So we're going to put this down, try to get it centered the best I can. So let's see if I can get this going here. Okay, that's doing all right. Let's get this one back here. Okay, let's get the rest of this down. Okay, so that's down. That seems to be holding pretty well. One more point that's important here is when you glue on this upper transverse graft, the distance between the graft and the neck end of the guitar here is important, because that's where your neck block is going to be going. So you want to be sure you've got enough distance to put your neck block in. Now, right now, I've got about 2 inches here. My neck block should be about 1.5 inches, maybe 1 5/8 inches. So I've got plenty of room. But you just need to be aware of that, because if you move this transverse graft too far back and it interferes with where the neck block would go, you're going to have to chisel that out so you can put your neck block in. So anyway, important point. So I'm going to wait a few minutes. I'll clean up the glue squeeze out, and we're pretty much done with the top for the moment. We'll let it sit, and then we're going to do the back, and then we'll start carving the braces after a while. This is a 25-foot radius dish that the top just fits into very nicely. And rather than let this soft spruce top rub up against this very coarse sandpaper, I've just put paper towels over it, just like I did before, and we're going to leave those there until we're done. So we're going to start off the same way as we did on the back. I've got my 2 blocks that mark 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to carve the X brace first. And in the middle, we're going to make that 5/8 tall. So I've just got my blocks stacked, and I'm going to mark that and take our block plane and start planing this section here and getting this X joint down to that 5/8 mark. So I like to go in multiple different directions here because we've got 2 different pieces of wood. But that's just about where we want the thickness to be. So now what we're going to do, so we're going to leave that 5/8 tall in the middle, and then we're going to come out 1.5 inches or so, maybe a couple of inches, and make a little mark out here. And this leg, this next leg, about that length, is going to go down to 3/8 of an inch. So I've got another one of my little blocks here that is 3/8 tall, and I'm going to set it down. Well, here, I'll do it on this one so you can see what I'm doing. I can't set it down on this side because I've got the bridge plate there, so I've got to set it down on the other side. There. And we'll mark that one too. And then out here, where this brace swoops down, we're only going to make it 3/8 out to about there. And we're going to use our curved sole plane to do that. So we'll take that down. And you don't have to make this an instant transition, but you want it to be fairly quick. And then this is going to remain, we're not doing a scalloped brace, this is going to remain 3/8 tall until out here we take it down to 1/8 on that final wing. So I'm just keeping an eye on the mark that I made over here. So I'm going to mark that out a little farther as well. that looks quite good out there. Let me get that down just a little bit lower. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So now out here, we're going to bring that down. This is about the last 2.5 to 3 inches. We're going to bring that down to 1/8, just like we did before. So I've got my 1/8 block. Pretty close. Yeah, that's very close out there now. Okay, I'm going to come and do this leg exactly the same way, and I'm going to do these two upper legs exactly the same way also. I'm going to come out here, take this down to 3/8 and that down to 1/8. So on the top we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places where it's going to tie into the kerf. So I want to be sure that all of these braces here, the X and the upper face brace, all swoop down to 1/8 inch at the edge. The lower face braces here, we'll talk about in a few minutes, those do not tie into the kerf. So we'll deal with those in a different way. So I'm going to finish carving these braces here, the X, and I'll be back in a few minutes and show you what it looks like. Okay, all of these braces are basically carved. So what I want to do, I move the position of the camera so you could see how we're going to carve these lower face braces. This segment right here of the lower face braces are kind of the hardest ones to carve. And so I'm just going to use a chisel. And I'm going to try to come in here and I'll use my thumb to kind of help guide the chisel and slice it just slightly rather than just shoving it straight ahead all the time. So I'm going to give it just a little bit of a slice action there and get these two down. Now they're not tucked into anything, so I'm just going to get these down to where they're very low. It doesn't have to be all the way down to 0. In fact, I recommend against trying to get it down to 0 because you'll just end up scratching the top of your guitar. And we don't want to be gouging a chisel into the top of our guitar. So I'd say that that's down to approximately a 32nd of an inch right now. And that's as far as I want to go with it. We'll come over here and do the other one as well. I'll do that later. But now, let me turn this around, keep going on this particular brace. Up here, this is going to go to 5/8. This is going to be 5/8 of an inch tall. So I've marked that already. And then this segment here is going to go down to 3/8, just like these other braces did. So I'm going to bring that to 3/8. And then out here, the last couple of inches, it's going to go down to nearly 0 again. Maybe leave a 32nd or something like that. So let's just get started on this and see how this goes. I'm going to make a little mark here on this inside so I can see that better. And the reason that I like to do this with this curved sole plane is because with a plane, you have more control over the depth of your cut. Sometimes with a chisel, it's hard to control until you've got a lot of experience with it. And I just find that doing it this way, I make fewer errors. And plus, I just kind of like using the plane. Now for these finger braces here, we will use a chisel, and I'll show you those in just a little while. So I want to get this last little segment here. Okay, so that's down to about a 32nd of an inch tall down there, and that's going to be good enough. So there is this brace. Now what I'm going to do later is I'm going to come along with this curved sole plane, because it's easier to do with this one than it is with the block plane. And just like before, just like on the back, I'm going to try to thin these braces as it gets towards the top, make them a little thinner and curved on the top. Same thing with here and all of the X braces. And just a little bit of explanation, this upper face brace here is going to be done just like the back braces. It's going to be 5/8 tall in the middle, and it's going to swoop down to 1/8 on the wings. So I'm going to go and I'm going to finish this brace up, do this one, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the finger braces. So that's it for now. I'll go do this off camera and see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we're almost done here with the carving of the braces on the top. And here they are. Everything's looking very, very good. I've carved the upper face brace, all these, and sanded them. They're all looking very nice. And the one remaining thing that we have to do, I guess it's 4 remaining things, are the 4 finger braces. So I'm going to show how to carve those. I've got a long chisel here, a paring chisel, that works really well for this because it enables you to get really low and the handle can stay out of your way. So I'm going to carve away a very large percentage of this brace, probably close to half of it. But what we want to do is just peak it in the middle and carve away everything else. So just very gentle. You don't want to rush this one. And you want to keep this chisel as parallel to that top as you possibly can, because you don't want to dig in by pushing down. You don't want to dig in at all. So ideally here, I'm just going to carve away everything until we get to a nice little peak in the middle. And that's going to be it. And that's it. It's not quite peaked here, but it's very, very close. And I think that's gonna do it. You could touch this off with a little bit of sandpaper. And that's about it. So I'm gonna go finish the other 3 of these, and then we'll take a last look at the top before we move on. Okay, we're just about done with the top here. Take another look at it. Everything's looking really nice. Everything's all sanded and shaped. All the finger braces are ready to go. The one thing that I'm going to do, and just before I finish the top, is I'm just going to put a small piece of cedar right across this joint here on the X brace. And that will help strengthen it up. So I'm just going to glue this down. And tape it. So there we go. That's about where we want it right there. So I've got a few little pieces of tape here. Just need a couple. There, just wiping away any excess with my finger. And that's going to be real good. I'll come back in a little while, sand this off, take the tape off, and make that all nice.